just start with a brief welcome and thanks for everyone this morning. I know this and other people will be coming. I'm excited to serve as executive director of Stonewall Columbus. I joined the team in June of 2020 during, of course, a tumultuous time in our short period experiences, and that continues to happen. So we're not going to act like 2020 has gone in the world and still dealing with these issues. But also we were in the middle of a pandemic, which has now become an endemic. And so many things have changed. And during that time, one of the things that has changed is that we merged the Family Pride Network to continue to be able to bring services to the community. In particular, as we understand, our LGBT community wants to start families. We have that right and ability to do so. And so we want to make sure that we continue to make space for that to happen. And we also have programming that sort of nestles the other end of the spectrum with our Trailblazer program. And so again, this is really important for us to find where you want to start family and how you want to end up once you get out of the house. Relaxing and engaging. As an experience, this symposium, now that I like to use the word symposium, it's more conversation and chat between friends, have been going on since 2015, which I think is really exciting. To think about the fact that Family Pride Network at the time had the foresight and thought to think about how we could bring together community to help us define what our families look like and find the appropriate ways to create those families as we so see fit. And so since 2015, some version of this has been happening, whether in person, online for the last year, or smaller sessions throughout a single month. This morning, we're kicking it off with a conversation about foster parenting, and that being a pathway to parenthood. Some people might say, hey, I don't want to be a full-time parent. Maybe being a parent for a week or a day or sometimes even longer to a foster child may be the appropriate way for you to engage in that process. But what we want to spend some time is really talking to folks who have had that experience, who have worked with people who have had that experience, and really just have an intimate conversation. I did send questions ahead of time for folks, so I didn't want to come prepared with lots of pre-prepared answers. A lot of things came together in the last minute, so that is really even very sort of like
very gay,
spontaneous in the moment. But hopefully, by the course of this conversation, our hope really is just to highlight some of the challenges and opportunities and experiences of what it means being a foster parent and where that can take you on your particular pathway to being a family. So I will like to ask our panelists here to go around and introduce themselves, and I'll start to lead some conversation around that. But if I can start down there, I can have you say your name, who you are, your experience, how recently you've been a foster parent and where that took you, and then have you brought it, of course.
Hi, I am attorney Hannah Bach-Jody. I've been born and raised here in Columbus, Ohio. Born at St. Anne's, educated at Christ the King and Tree of Life, Capital undergrad, Capital Law School. Didn't find out I was gay until 17 when I was in the Army and my mom, the pastor, was helping me get the demon out. So I from there to here. My beautiful wife, Kristen, of 11 years, is in the back. Hi, girl. We met at Standard Hall down the way back when it was Liquid. And I have built my career on serving the LGBT community from the outset. Since I found out I was one, I'm like, hey, this kind of sucks. I'm in the legal field and we have nothing, pre-Oberga fell back in 2010. So I actually was on the forming board of the Family Pride Network with Joe Matesta and a bunch of other folks, and actually helped start the Pathways to Parenthood conference all those years ago because I wanted to find out how my wife and I could start a family. We went through 3 years of trying to get pregnant. Each of our uteruses, neither really took, thank goodness. No offense to like pushers out there, but and we have since spent the last 2 years becoming licensed foster parents, and little Lancer is back in the back being very good and quiet so we can ride motorcycles later. But yeah, I'm an attorney. I do almost exclusively LGBT work, basically anything and everything, disillusions, marriage formations, adoption, surrogacy, estate planning, emergency planning, name changes, gender marker corrections. So across the board, if I don't know how to do it, I can find a friend who can. So I'm here to help give you guys a legal framework, as well as my own personal take on these last 10 weeks with a 12-year-old in my house and bathroom. So that's me. I'm Hannah. Happy to be here. Thank you for having me. Good luck.
Morning, my name is Colin Page McGinnis. but by day, professionally, I am the CEO of Sprout 5, which is one of Columbus's oldest early childhood nonprofits. My husband and I actually started our Parenthood. You did a good job.
Thank you so much.
Actually, at the conference in 2018, we've been through many iterations, and we actually just got licensed for foster care. That's where we settled. I know, I'm trying. But we touched every aspect of like how the process of becoming a parent and what that meant for our family and what that would look like would impact kind of who we are. And you throw a pandemic in there, so we got to slow down a little bit, which I actually think helped us come back to foster, because that's where we started and where we ended up exploring both foster, adoption, surrogacy, and then back to foster.
Good morning, my name is Jeff Carter, and I've been a foster parent since 2017, my husband and I. By day, I work for Columbus City Council as a legislative aide.
Get it?
Yes, thank you. I'm also served on the board of Stonewall Columbus as a trustee. This coming January will be 5 years, and then my term will expire, sadly. So I would say what brought me to fostering is, I spent a lot of my younger years, my younger adult life, serving in group homes, working with those who had developmental disabilities, as well as some adults as well, and as well as behavioral issues as well. And my husband, who was 7 years younger than me,
That's what you're next.
so of course, we were at different stages in our life, right? I was like, okay, I'm a little older.
Yeah,
and it was like, well, we got to take 2025. Yeah. But he was in his life where he was still in school, working as a doctor. He wasn't really ready for children. Me, I was getting older. I'm like, yeah, but my turn, I'm getting up there. I need to figure out what we're going to do. So we figured, why don't we test out the waters by being foster parents, see how well we survive this challenge, and see where our strengths are as far as being parents. And he would come home every weekend. We started off just doing respite care on weekends for other foster parents who may need a break or whatever. And then we did that for a number of years. And when he graduated in 2020, when we moved back to, or 19, we moved back to Columbus, we began fostering full time. So we had placements ever since then. We really loved it. And I would say starting off slow during respite allowed us to understand, okay, yeah, you're better at doing this paperwork and everything else. I'm better at cooking. And so, it really balanced out as far as who's better at appointments and things like that. And then we kind of prepared ourselves accordingly.
Nice.
I can't talk then. My name's Kate Guyton.
You got room for bottoms here.
That's born and raised in Columbus as well. I'm foster parent, my wife and I, for just about 4 years. I'm a pusher also. So yeah, 3 kids, 2 bio. One is a month old, so I told them, so you got about 2 hours of my time and I gotta go home to feed the baby. And then we have 1 foster son that we adopted about 2.5 years ago. What was I just gonna say? You said something. Oh yeah, my wife is significantly older, not really, she's 6 years, but same difference. And we met and we got married in less than 8 months after we met. And
That's big.
yeah, we followed it up, and we had some conversations around like, do we want children, do we not want children? She was somebody who never thought she'd have kids, just thought she saw her life panning out, and I've always thought I'd have a bunch of them. So we got married, and then we were like, oh, okay, well, let's start having this conversation, because we did everything else really fast. And we really thought first we would adopt, private adoption, infants, and we started looking into it. We knew how much it was going to cost.
Yeah.
But when we started looking into it, we could see that families could choose you or not choose you because you were part of the community.
Yeah.
We didn't want that. We wouldn't be any part of that, especially with the amount of money on the line. And so we started looking at foster to adopt. We looked at going through surrogacy. And so we ultimately landed on myself having a baby first, while we took the time to get licensed to foster and adopt along the way. So we got lucky. We had 1 placement and adopted out of that about 2 years later. Yeah.
So I can also add, I'm a parent, but I'm a foster parent, foster to adopt parent as well. And so sort of lesbian life, which I think is interesting. So in 2017, I spoke truth and honesty, and also sharing. I spoke with my partner at the time, and we had started a conversation about the parenting journey He was not significantly younger than me, but a couple years. I realized that I was more along that path than my partner was. And so when we split up, I did foster to adopt foster parenting, and I did a condensed course.
Wow.
I did mine in about 6 to 8 months. Because I was behind in terms of the timeline that I had for myself, and where I wanted to be. Much like the story here, we had a couple of calls for placements. My partner and I, we met during my journey to parenthood. And he said, okay, let's figure it out. We'll see what happens. We got a couple calls. I answered the first one I really was able to say yes to. And she's been with us ever since. So she's been with us 4.5 years. We're able to adopt her about a year ago. That journey, where you start as a foster parent, may also turn into being a full-time parent, depending on how that path goes. So thank you all so much for sharing and being here this morning. I think it's interesting as I don't think any of us came to sort of the space of being a foster parent the same way. And I know that when I was going through the training process, I was often the only individual single person in the room going through classes, but by far the only queer person in the room. Can we talk a little bit about what that experience was like, maybe for you being queer in sort of some of these foster parenting classes, or the training, or how you were even selecting an agency to work with, and how you took that into context? Anyone?
Yeah, I didn't find anything to be truly different in the classes until we took one about LGBT education, and we had formed a really good relationship with that. She was actually our licensee, but her license, what was her name? What's my term?
Oh,
She licensed.
what license?
Yeah. I have a baby sucking my brains out every hour of the day, so yeah, like this. But it wasn't until we took that class, we had formed like a really good relationship with her. And we did the fast licensing as well. So we were done in about 6 months, and so we formed a good relationship with them 2 to 3 times a week taking classes. And so it wasn't until we did the LGBT education class that you could tell like she was uncomfortable to teach it, because we were in the room. And when she wouldn't use the right terms and everything else, and like, people would ask questions and everybody would kind of be like, we're not the masters of this community, like we're part of it, we'll give you the answers we think.
That's the thing though, it's like you are the community to the people.
You are, yeah. And so we learned that pretty quickly. But what I will say is, going through the foster experience, before we picked our organization, when we went through Buckeye Ranch, we had met with 2 or 3 other organizations, and they all made some type of a comment within the introductory meeting about, we're okay with placing children with LGBT families, but we're not going to advertise to it, or we're predominantly geared towards religious affiliation.
Yeah.
And so we were out, we left meetings right in the middle, because we didn't want to feel included but excluded at the same time.
Yeah.
So I think the rest of the licensing part wasn't bad, but it was figuring out what organization do you want to go through. And I think that's what you're thinking. I wasn't expecting that.
And I mean, we've always had those whisper campaigns in our community of not this one, because they don't advertise to us. And it may even be because you have hate, tolerance, acceptance, celebration. I'd much rather be at celebration. Especially if I'm going to pay you money to build my family.
Yes.
So I think you've experienced something that is really common.
Yeah.
So our overall experience was unique. We actually ended up going with a faith-based organization. And so we didn't realize that in the very beginning, but it's okay, once we put our paperwork on, yeah, we're kind of in this now. So, but
Your holy water.
it turned out to be a really good experience. We found that we decided to take that opportunity, instead of thinking negatively about it or being concerned, we actually turned it into an educational opportunity for the other parents who were there, right? So they really would like to, they engaged us, because there's a lot of kids who are part of the LGBT community who are in foster care. Right now, our child, who goes by the pronouns they, them, is trans, right? And it was an opportunity for us to be able to say, yeah, bring those kids to us, because we can be the ones to nurture them. And for other foster parents who did have children who identify with our community, we were a resource for them, right? And being able, and they were wanting us to start a group with our agency and other external agencies to be able to have these conversations with us. My husband is a counseling psychologist by trade at OSU, so he has worked with me for a number of years. And most of his dissertation was all about the coming out experience and how that affects your adult development. So
Lovely. Get us your coffee?
it's published.
All right.
And it's the only one like that that's published.
So I think where my perspective is gonna be different than everyone else's, is I was post-pandemic in the process. So like our licensing process was 6 weeks. We blitzed it, everything was online, you could stack 4 classes at a time. Yeah, it was very weird, you don't have to go in order anymore. And it's interesting because if that would have been the case when we started in 2019, I don't know if we would have actually gone through with it, because there's a lot of. Right, so I don't know if you're gonna have questions about the licensing process in general, but I'm just gonna roll with it. And the caveat being, I am a developmental psychologist by training, right? So, well, no, I say that because you think about all the stereotypes that you're worried about with foster care, or at least that was our conversation in our house. And I was like, well, this is why foster gets a bad rep. The trainings aren't that great. Like, we're not actually applying proper child development here. We're not talking about the LGBTQ community the right way. We're not talking about like single parenthood the right way. And it wasn't anything that turned us off, but it had the opportunity for my husband and I to sit down and say, hey, let's talk about why the way they presented attachment and trauma is actually not correct. And let's talk through how I can better equip you for that experience. But I don't know if that's because it was online and we don't really have the same connection of going through the process of meeting and everything like this and doing your training that way. I feel like we talk to every agency that you possibly can. I think they all have their strengths and their drawbacks, and it's really you're choosing your agency and the licensure process. You have to be comfortable with the person you're working with. So we actually thought we were going to use one agency, got matched with our pre-licensing specialist, and I was like, yeah, I don't know if I want to hang out with this person and talk about. I mean, yeah, kind of.
Well,
You know, like the question that you ask when you go through the licensing process and the things you have to talk about are intimate and they're personal. And if you feel like the person doesn't appreciate the family that you're creating, it's not worth doing it. Let's switch to someone who we are comfortable with.
Totally. What was the question? ADHD.
So no, you're fine.
Different levels.
In terms of just sort of understanding what it might have been for you in your experience as a queer person going through your foster, like, was that an issue? Did it seem like an issue in terms of the agency possibly, or?
Well, no, people are mostly astounded by me. So I'm gonna take that, as a grain of salt. And I like to honestly be that person, the kind of Kool-Aid man of LGBT people, because it allows others to come back quietly and just kind of sneak in the group and like, we should purchase here. And I'm like, hey. Well, and the other part is I'm an adoption attorney, so they treated me with a little modicum of respect, probably and possibly. And then Kristen's lovely. I mean, how could you not? She's a Libra. God bless her. But we walked into this. We work with NAF, the National Youth Advocacy Program, and again, having been an adoption attorney for 10 years, having worked with LGBT people coming in and saying, "Oh, NAF," at first we're like, "Oh, it's and they're a bunch of old white ladies in Dayton who are lovely and mostly good at their job, and it's fine. But as far as the LGBT part went, actually, Lance, not to blow you up here, bro, but he's been in 17 different homes because he counted on his little fingers on my kitchen table and told me. And some of those homes let him go because he was non-binary bisexual. And he told me he was non-binary bisexual before he told me his name was Lance. So like, great, welcome. And we're very big lesbians and very big advocates, and we try to put him around all kinds of human beings. I mean, one of my best friends is Sarah Monroe, who's a trans advocate and a wonderful woman. And he's like, "We don't see Sarah." I'm like, yeah, sure. Yeah. He walks out with like 10 crystals and a cigarette. I don't know. Yes, we're treated differently because we're gay. Of course we are. Our experience is completely different than anyone else's. We're coming to this because we have to. We are doing this because, we are not only saving our family, but a child and their experience. And who knows better than us, people who have been neglected and sent out and told that we're other and left alone and said that we're not good enough to be a part of this group. Who knows better than us what that kid's going through? So yes, we're different because we're gay. We're better.
So I think, and I think if you think about sort of our own identities as we step into the process, one of the things, much like adoption, unlike natural childbirth, you can't really sort of choose characteristics of identities.
Of course.
So did you consider, the identity of the youth, age, race, gender, were these characteristics things that you thought about or considered as you?
Of course, yeah, I give you a list and say, which characteristics will you consider?
Yeah.
And we'll pay you more or less depending on what you say. If this kid's more difficult, it takes $5 more. So fucking annoying, sorry. Just to kind of go through it, we said we would accept up to 2 children ages 0 to 8. Siblings, any gender, any background, any preference, we kind of said we'll take medical considerations as we go. And we got Lance, who's 12. It was a total fluke. And like you said, it's just, you don't know what's gonna come down the pike. You just are like, we'll accept anything, and that's the way you treat your life too, a little bit. So just kind of go at it with that perspective, is you can say, I like a child that is neurotypical and of my genetic descent and all those other things, but you could show up with me.
And how was, I'm thinking, and how was that for you all? I mean, how deeply did you consider the context of what type of child you bring into the home, their queer identity or not?
So for us, which makes sense with the work that I do, I was like, give us the little kids. And it's interesting right now, when you go through classes, there are a lot of folks that want teenagers, which
Really?
to each their own.
Where?
Great question.
Great.
Yeah, but we're going through classes and my husband Chris and I are the only ones that say we want under 5. And everyone else is like, give us teenagers. Nuts. It's the last thing I want in my sending them away when they get to that. But I remember when you get the paperwork, which I'm assuming is the same for all agencies, but the one with NIAB at least is extensive. And it's this list of every characteristic and every medical.
Cancer has 5 options.
Yeah.
Cancer in your past, currently has it, in treatment, in remission, diet,
Yeah.
which will you accept? And you're like, Mama didn't make enough mimosas.
Well, I trying to make it up. Yeah, it's like an 18-page document or something like that. And we said, hey, grab a bottle of wine. We're gonna sit down. We're gonna go through this. And the things that I don't know on the incarcerated background and the legal stuff, I'm gonna ask my husband because he's also an attorney, and he's gonna ask me the questions about the child development, the medical side of things. Because they don't give you a cheat sheet either for what the words are. So you're sitting on Google and you're like, is that what that really means? And it's right. But when you go through, we remember when we first started talking with our family and our friends about this packet that we had to fill out. There was a lot of weight also placed on the perception that other people had about you deciding what water was right for you.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like, well, you think you can take them, you go do this too.
Yeah.
I
Nana.
yeah, but yeah, it's you learn a lot about your partner, you learn about a lot about yourself, things that I thought were going to be okay for me ended up not. And as we started thinking more about it, and things that I thought were going to matter didn't.
And vice versa.
Yeah.
So I'll say, in the beginning, it was tough, right? I mean, you're being asked questions like, are you okay with a white child? Are you okay with a black child? Male, female, various different ages. So it makes you really think, like, if you check one of these boxes, what does that say about me, right? And so, and the one thing I've learned after doing it for a couple of years, you really have to be honest with yourself.
Yeah.
Because there have been times where I've had we fostered a white female, and for me, I struggled because I couldn't put her hair in a ponytail. I couldn't put her hair in a ponytail where it would stay, and the little tie would just kept slipping off, and I felt terrible. Like I can't do this, right? And so, of course, I had to figure out how to do that. But those are some limitations you really have to think about as you bring these kids into your house, because you want them to feel comfortable.
Yeah.
And the last thing you want is for their placement with you to be disrupted because it wasn't a good fit. And I will also say that I've also had white children call me the N-word. Yeah, that happens. It just depends on the exposure they've had as kids. And so I got to a point where I told my husband, I was like, yeah, we're not doing that. My husband, he's white, he's Jewish. So he was able to speak to those kids. And for me, I'm like, yeah, I don't know if I can continue doing this, right?
Yeah.
This kid continues to call me this word. Now that I'm probably the closest to that child, right? We decided they weren't a great fit for us, and they have been in foster care since they were 2. They're now 12, and has been, in, I think, I want to say like maybe 11 different placements all over the U.S., not just local. And this kid had no foundation, so we continue to stay in the life, even though they're in a group home in Toledo. We drive up here every other weekend. But I will also say that you just really have to understand your limits. Now, as far as age, we prefer teens. It was an point in my life where both my parents were in prison, and I was going around from one placement to the next within my family. Luckily, thank God for that. I was one of the lucky ones in that regard. But still, I think that for me, I would love to have a baby. I would love to have a young child and be able to cuddle and be able to have this child really associate me as their parent. But I also understand there are kids who are on their way to entering adulthood. And how can I prepare them for that?
Yeah.
How can I make sure that they have the resources, the exposure? I mean, I've had kids who have met the mayor, have met Congresswoman Bailey, right? Have gone to different events and had different exposures they otherwise would have never had. And this changes the trajectory of their life.
Yeah.
It makes them think, okay, there are opportunities and I do belong in these spaces.
Yeah. And also, I don't know is a fine answer.
Yeah.
A lot of these
Yeah.
questions you just haven't asked yourself before. And you won't find your limits until little kids press them. So just another framework, because not knowing is okay.
Yeah, boy, do they press them. I have, we have 2 toddlers, a 3-year-old and a 4-year-old, they're 10 months apart. So it's like having twins, and yeah, now big babies, so yeah, they press them. We knew we wanted a baby, a younger child to start off with, and our ultimate goal was to adopt out of foster care. We thought though we would have multiple placements before we had the opportunity to do that. We were just one of the lucky ones that had one placement and did get to adopt. In our trainings, they gave advice that if you have kids of your own or other kids in your home, to foster children that are younger than them. So if they have any bad habits or anything like that coming into your home, they're going to be more impacted by your children, teaching them, you know, the right ways to do things or different ways to think of things. So we knew we were going to have a baby regardless. At the time when we got licensed, we had a 1-year-old, so we knew we're sticking to 0 to 1, 0 to 2, and we'll see what we get. We definitely felt like horrible human beings filling out the checklist, because you're like, yeah, think about the 5 different problems with cancer.
You're picturing this little child just disappearing in smoke with like a limp, you know?
Yeah. And I think you also just have a general assumption of what is foster care,
Yeah.
right? What,
And Gables, that's my only framework.
yeah. We didn't necessarily think that like a child placed with us was gonna have trauma, or what does that trauma look like? You know, what is all of that? And what the process looks like. I think what you mentioned about your training and how crazy it was being virtual, it was just as bad in person. I'll tell you, like, doesn't prepare you truly for all the things you're gonna go through, just surface level, what you might experience. So when we had our son placed with us, I got the call. We had multiple calls, never had a placement, kind of were giving up, thinking like we're not really gonna get a child placed for a while. Got a call at 11 o'clock at night. Hey, we have a baby for you. 6-month-old, malnourished, biracial baby. We need you to drag down to like Whitehall to pick him up. And I said, okay. And I show up and they give me the chunkiest, super white, blonde hair, blue-eyed kid. And I said, here you go. Like, and I said, is this the right kid? Is this the name of the person you're picking up? And I said, yeah. She said, here you go. And so I think just as much as you don't necessarily know what you're gonna get, you could get a call that says, here's your placement, right? Here's your description, go. And, you know,
Iglesias.
yeah, and you have 2 hours to get there, and you get there and it's not at all. So you really cannot anticipate the children that are gonna enter your home, what's gonna come with them.
And they'll change on you. The second you're like, oh, this is who you're at. I'm like, oh, I'm more comfortable.
Yeah, yeah,
My weirdness out. It's very neat, so I got it.
yeah. I will say they told us in training, like, once the people who are placing the children in your home kind of know your weaknesses, right? They're gonna play off them. Their goal was to get as many children placed as possible, right? So the lady very quickly learned mine, and she called me with three separate times with twins. And I was like, I want to save all of them. I want to save them all, right? Like, save them all. We're gonna calculate daycare and I'll call you back. And the reality is,
That sounds music.
yeah, but the reality is, take what you can handle. Be honest with yourself, be honest with your spouse. Know who your support system is. I think what we learned a lot about our family is we put on our questionnaire, we were open to, right? We were open to any gender, we were open to any race, any background. And we very quickly learned that our families weren't necessarily supporting that. They expected us to have a white child, right? With no disabilities. And so that was something we went through during our process, as well as explaining to our families, like, get on board or get out, because this is what we're doing with our lives. So
Come on, sis.
if you don't have that figured out already, I have that conversation with who you think your support system is going into it.
Well, and even open up to friends and family when
Yeah.
you're thinking about starting the process, because I've had friends that have come and said like, hey, if you need to put me down for the, not respite, but there's a step in between, so this is the path you choose, there's a lot of words, a lot of acronyms, you'll learn them along the way. But essentially there's you and your partner, or you individually as the foster parent. And then there's a step in between, less than 6 hours, but more than 2 that you can put on and have to go get some fingerprints done, and those folks can help out. And then if you need someone to, stay overnight, but you don't want to call respite care, there's additional training folks can do, and et cetera, et cetera. I have a lot of friends that openly have told me, I do not want children of my own, I'm not interested, both in the community and not, folks that work with me ironically in the childcare space, like, hey, I don't want kids, but they're like, put me down as number one as the person to call if you have to go somewhere and you need to pick up. And I think what's cool about that is when you have awkward conversations with family or folks that you think are going to be your support group, then knowing you have this whole other side that come forward and say,
Oh, yeah.
this
Chosen family is everything.
Yeah.
And then we can talk about healthcare power of attorneys and financial power of attorneys and nomination of guardian for minor children, should anything happen to you during the time of crisis. I know an attorney. That's exactly.
Stick around.
Going more. Yeah, they also have some proven parents, right? So this is what comes online when, when you have your bio children and you take your bio children over your mother's house, over your best friend's house, where they want you to have a little bit of that flexibility with this foster kid too, so it feels a little bit more organic. So we've been able to utilize prudent parenting and like take the kid over to my mom's house maybe for a day. Or, my best friend come over to our house and, they have everything, they'll just stay overnight. We take a little, because sometimes you like to make some time for yourself. And as we prefer not to use respite if we don't have to, because I still feel like that's a disconnect with
Yeah.
the child. I don't like
It's
that.
a scary thing for,
Yeah.
it's like a warning
Yeah.
or a punishment sometimes. They think it's a reaction to a place as opposed to a request for space.
What is that?
Respite is where you have another licensed foster family take in your child for a weekend typically.
Oh, okay.
But you have to have a foster license in order to take a kid overnight. So respite is just a fancy word for a break. And the kid is safe and fine and lovely, but there's an emotional instinct there. It's not like dropping your kids off at grandma's, really. These are strangers.
it feels like another placement.
Yeah.
It does. And it's the same feeling. They're packing up their bag.
Yep.
See you in a couple weeks. Not really.
More people going out paperwork for them about how the weekend went. It's just, I just don't like it. For them to be able to go with someone that they see come over to our house on a regular basis, or be able to stay in our house and that person come to our house and stay with them, I just feel like it's better and it feels more family.
Yeah, very that.
I mean, I think what we are hearing, what we can see is that there's more to foster parenting than probably just a subject of what your child happened at the time. What you may akin it to is sort of someone giving you property that you are not allowed to leave
Availment.
anywhere. Right, so which is weird, right? But also, I think a wonderful thing, right? Like this, we are entrusting this child's life to you, so make sure that you're always watching it for this young person's life. But in these spaces, because that becomes a legal thing, you can't just drop them off at mom and dad's, because if something happens to that child while they're at mom and dad's, it's not only your fault, it becomes the agency's fault. And so the agency is always trying to protect themselves. So alternative care providers, respite care providers, are all people who have gone through this process of certification so that if something happens to the child, legally, the organization at the back end is covering themselves. I think when we're talking about sort of the space of wanting to be as natural as possible, prudent parenting is actually a class that you have to take during the foster parenting process that lets you, in 4 hours a day or something that lets you made a good decision. Here's how you make a good decision, which is an interesting thing. To say if they class, I wish all parents had taken class.
Yeah, right.
So the prudent parenting class really just allows you the flexibility to be able to say, hey, we went to my grandparents' house or my parents' house, and we didn't tell you that we were going to my parents' house because that's what prudent parents would do. They just pack the kids up and say, let's go visit, you know, man and Papa for the weekend, or we're gonna go spit our own uncles. You know,
I think something that's really interesting about the process as someone who's really recently gone through it is how much weight you feel around why does our family not get trusted?
Yes.
To take care of a child, but the neighbors next door could pop out a kid.
Yeah, these meth heads are rolling out with popsicles.
I
I'm
mean,
like, sweetheart, it's 7 a.m.
I mean,
Not what you were saying. That's
but
what I
still,
said.
yeah.
I think you-
These guys.
Yeah,
Yeah, sorry, closer.
it's all right. But the framing that I have, because I also work with foster parents at work, is this idea of like everything that we are going through this process through licensure is stuff that you should be thinking about if you're thinking about being a good parent. We just have to sign paperwork at the end to show that it is actually the case. And it's not really a reflection on us as parents, it's really because of the agency. So it's the same thing, you know, shifting a little bit, but the work, most of my day is just filling out the same type of paperwork for Jobs and Family Services to say that my teachers can take care of a kid in a classroom. And it's really to protect us on the legal side of it. It's not because anyone thinks we're doing something wrong, it's to make sure that we don't. And this is just another round of paperwork with Jobs and Family Services to say, yeah, go ahead, you can be a parent.
Lawyers are the worst.
I know.
Okay, what other questions do you have?
So we've got 3 minutes left. I
Oh,
want to make sure that we open a moment to the audience, so.
Gonna ask, you guys have told such incredible stories, and I know a lot of them have been like, we got a placement and adopted. What advice do you have for families that foster care, really the goal is reunification with their bio family? Just advice to give for those babies that you have to, you know, that you're going to return to their families.
Yeah, that's a whole other option. We've been talking about foster to adopt, which is where the kids' parental rights have been terminated in the juvenile courts in some capacity. There is also fostering as a alternative to putting the kids up for adoption and then having to return the kids, which is called reunification. If that is your scenario, that is far more, I think, rife with pitfalls, because you're walking this very fine line between bonding with a child and providing them a resource and a security and a parent, and then allowing them to then transition back over to someone who is re-entering that role. So it is emotionally difficult. It is financially difficult raising a child, and the respite money may not be there because you don't have an agency who's getting funded. So I think it's a lot more stressful, a lot more difficult, but maybe even more worthwhile, because you're preserving a family as opposed to you know, protecting the one that you're going to create. So I think as you walk through that, I would just have a real strong representation to reflect your right, because reunification is a mandatory requirement for the state. It says you shall reunify. And it doesn't take into regard really any of the factors that the parents might have. So it's difficult as a foster parent to protect the child that's going to be reunified if you have inside information that perhaps the agency thinks you're picking up a Latino child who's not nourished. You know, they don't have all the information, and you may. So having your own representation, having your own voice, because you're not a party to the case, you have no say, you have no rights. And it's very difficult if things go badly, which they do often, because that's why the courts are in this place in loco parentis as the parent of the child for the time being. And as you're in loco parentis, the parent of the child for the time being, you have to navigate not only your personal instincts, but also the child's needs. And then you have visitation with the parent, visitation with grandparents. I mean, it could be a whole thing. So if you want to talk one-on-one, maybe about what your situation might be, or if anybody has that situation, that's going to be super specific to you.
Yeah.
But if you're looking to pursue foster as an adoption process, this is more relevant.
Yeah.
So-
I'm here to talk about infant adoption later, but I more am just like, I think it's such a beautiful avenue to build families. But also what I've always been told really in the work that we do is that your heart has to be in that space. But you guys are saying that you went directly to foster, like for kids who are
Supposed to agree.
So you can get licensed
only
as
for,
just foster, which really is, and it's also awesome. It's essentially professional parenting. And you really are providing a safe space for the bio family to go and get everything in line that has to happen there. You're providing a home for the child. You're giving them the care that's needed at that point when it's not present in their current or their bio home. There is though a process you can take the licensing can be the same, it might differentiate a little bit, but you can go in and like our licensing. I knows that really, if you think they're gonna go back to their family in 2 months, we're not the right home for them.
So you just,
And we were really upfront at the beginning, to the point that NIAB said, hey, are you sure you actually want to go through this process? We said, no, yeah, we're sure, but we need you to understand.
Yeah.
This is what we are looking to do.
And I have like one more quick again. So our goal is never to adopt. Right, we prefer teenagers. So usually if they're in the system that long, there's a good chance that they may not be reunified with their parents. And
Right.
so that's why we're saying, okay, well, at least if we can't get you reunified with your parents, at least we can prepare you for adulthood. At least we can prepare you for college. Get you through preparatory, I never say that word, training, all that good stuff, just to make sure that they're ready to go as an adult. Or once they do turn 18, they still have someone to kind of lean on once they enter adulthood.
Yeah.
And then I will also say one thing we also are very critical about that I get on a lot of other foster parents, you do not ever have the right to say anything negative about their bio parents. Regardless of your experience with them, you don't have the right to do that. This is terrible because you need to make sure that there's still a space for that bio parent. That is still their child and they're always going to have some type of love in their heart for them.
And that is still their parent, and they're always gonna have
Yeah.
some type of love in their heart.
thank you for that.
And, I'll take the privilege of the last here, as we wrap up. My path to parenthood, and having our daughter today was individual and single. And so I knew that as a single person, I believed I was not capable of full-time, all the time parenting. So I did foster to adopt. I had made that determination in my mind and mental capacity that this child would be with me for a day, a week, a month, or a year. And I was fully prepared to say this is the best thing for that child, to make the space for them to feel loved, to see love, to receive love, to learn what that could be. But then to also make the space that if that opportunity for them to go back to their own family was there, that it could be. I think on my journey, I just was privileged that my foster daughter turned into my daughter, which is part of the reason why I made that mental decision to also do foster to adopt in the training process, because I wanted to be prepared for that occasion or occurrence where a child who has been in my home may not be able to be reunified with their family. And that was just a beautiful occurrence in this situation. I think what we have found or seen this morning is that while people may think foster parenting is a quick and easy sort of pathway to parenthood, we realize it is a deeply introspective journey to understanding not only who you are, but the community of support that you have around you.
Yes.
And so I think this morning, I just want to say thank you to each of you for being that deeply introspective on your journeys to parenthood. To think not only about the youth and young people that you bring into their homes, but also how you're impacting them as you send them out to the world and the world that sees you parenting around you. So thank you so much for joining us for the first session this morning, and we really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you, Kristen.